So
what'd you say, Nick? Buy TNT?
What?
Buy TNT?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see when you come around here what the problem is.
Okay.
Build
Yeah.
one generic slider for an LJ build. It's made stupid long, so you have to cut it back there. You can see by the Sharpie mark and what's already been cut out of the corner to fit 40-inch tires. Why would you build a set of corners for an extended wheelbase LJ build? That's what they're billed as. That has a factory opening in the corner. Do you really think you're going to stretch?
That's what they call that
Yes.
corner?
You really think you're going to stretch an LJ and put 32-inch freaking tires on it?
Probably not.
It's like,
No. Well, so those that are on here, there's a few on here. Let's, I'm going to get them up to date a little bit here. So we're working on this LJ, and it came with
reworking everything
right.
that came.
The customer had a lot of parts already that he was wanting us to use. So one of our competitors made the corners and the fenders and the sliders. So you would think when it comes time to mount all said things, they're all made by the same company, that they would all work together.
The front at the fender opening?
Right. So as you see, where they mount, we are going to have to cut that much off to make it work with that fender. Now I will say they do have a very good welder, and he does make excellent welds. They do look good, but why can't you just bolt this up? Now TNT stuff, that's how that works. You get it so that you can bolt it all up. But it's kind of exciting to see this LJ is down on the ground. Kind of. What are some key things you want to point out, Bob? I see some shiny metal.
We've done a coilover conversion.
Oops, get my fingers on it.
Just give me the phone.
Oh, good.
It's easier.
There you go.
So we've done the coilover conversion front and rear. Since we're standing at the rear, we'll start with the rear. It's a rock crawler suspension for whatever they claim stretch is. The arms were not the right lengths, so, and which worked to our advantage. Since we were doing a coilover conversion, we used this style of lower coilover mount / lower control arm mount. That's pirated from our kit. Obviously the angles had to change, but we're capable of making things, so we took our off-the-shelf part and switched the angles to match Jeremy's. I'm sorry, I don't know how to switch this.
Right there. Okay. There you go. Jeremy's
Dual triangulated rear, which if you look, it's hard to see it since the Jeep's down on the floor, but you can see that lower control arm right there. If I can get square to the frame, it's got about 3 degrees of triangulation, which makes it, and you can't see me doing air quotes again, dual triangulated. Which, anyway, that worked out to our advantage for the coilover kit. We just changed our lower mounts, put our upper towers in it. Our upper towers French through the frame. You can see where we cut the frame and sunk them in through the frame. And then that piece of tube there is a cross member that ties both towers together. On the back side, which you can't see, is our, maybe you can if I gotta get on my hands and knees. Hang on. This would have been easier on the lift. That cross member right there, that the tri-hat is now about a finger's width off at full bump stop. That gains you almost 2 inches of up travel versus the factory piece that's in there. We cut that out, put our cross member in. And you can see we did not use the the brace or bridge, even though that company calls it a truss, that is a truss full length, locks into the bump stop targets, which we fabricated to facilitate making all this work. Locks into the truss, goes all the way across the diff, all the way over there to the other side. Instead of just some 1/4 inch plate standing up that has like 3.5 inches of weld surface on that you're mounting your whole suspension to. Not. No one makes that air bump can anymore. We've all went to this style, or not we, as I don't do it, but all the manufacturers have went to that style of bump stop can, because they can laser cut them out of a piece of tube on a laser cutter, and they're quick down and easy to manufacture. These have to be done on a lathe so that the tube gets bored to the proper diameter for the air bump to actually fit in it. So we made them on the lathe and Frenched them into the frame to get them where they needed to be. That little bracket you can see sticking there is potentially a new part for our new, well, it's not our sway bar, but our style of mounting. We use this Curry anti-rock. It's a universal fit piece. You can get it in 32 inch wide and 36. Since we're doing coilovers, we did the 36. If you were trying to make all this work with coil springs, you would have to go to the 32 because the backside of the coil spring would run right through the sway bar. But with coilovers, I can go to the bigger sway bar. Typically on an LJ Curry, Rock Jock, it's chicken or the egg since the brothers split, mounts back here and the arm comes forward. That doesn't work with the California gas tank because the California gas tank fills this space way up in this corner, which kind of blocks that standard issue mounting of that sway bar. So we went to this style. We've done it on several Jeeps now. I've got brackets designed. It's mounted in 4 places. I don't know if you can see them. There's the outer mount on the outer end of the truss, and there are 2 of those tabs on the center, and then obviously another one on the far side. So that sway bar's not going anywhere. It's packaged up inside. It's out of the way. There's still plenty of room to run exhaust over top of it since the sway bar moves up and down with the axle. Obviously it's at bump stop currently, so we got about 4.5 inches between the floor and the top of that sway bar. The piece of cake putting exhaust through there. But this front mount, we needed a way to attach it to the chassis, so I designed that front mount last week, I guess. And it has 3 holes in it so that you can adjust the rate of the sway bar. And the anti-rock also has, I think, 5 holes in the end of their arms. So you have a whole bunch of tuning opportunity with that bracket for your rear sway bar. So we're getting the corners mounted up today so that we can start trimming. The Sharpie line you see is based off of a 42-inch diameter cardboard template we have, because the goal for this Jeep someday is to put 42s on it. So we're making sure we leave enough room so we don't have to bring it back in the shop and retune everything. Bump stops may have to get tuned slightly. You know, you can't test that until you actually test it. But today's adventure is California body armor, which, well, as we've already shown you, doesn't really fit very well. So there will be a phone call if you're watching, Ryan. We will discuss this afternoon. It is cheaper to put my real Guardian Series sliders that actually mount in multiple planes versus this piece of angle iron with a tube welded to it. So it's probably cheaper to put a real set of sliders on it than it's going to be to pay us the hours it takes to cut these to fit, because I can pull a tape measure, send that order over to manufacturing, and we can modify our file to match what the wheel well opening is going to be on this corner. Bada boom, bada bing. Have a set of semi-custom sliders made in a day. It's way cheaper than paying us all the headache and time and effort it's going to take to cut these and make them fit. And then too, we can also, since these are a universal fit slider, they have one slider tube. The tube work that's on them is one size fits all, and it's going to leave a fairly sizable gap back here, because you can use your imagination to trace that cut line. So just the tail end of that slider is going to come off to make the wheel well opening right, and then you're going to have about an 8-inch gap from where you're running on your rub rail to where you fall off the rub rail and cave the slider and corner in. Pretty cool. Not. So it's probably in everyone's best interest for us to just make a set of sliders and make somebody a good deal on these uncut, unmolested sliders, because once we start cutting, nobody's going to want them. The front is all done, fab work. So we got the rock, or the anti-rock sway bar installed. We have our steering stretch installed with a PSC steering box. We have East Coast gear axles. It's a Dana high pinion Dana 60 center with old school kingpin reed knuckles and C's. Pretty cool. Pretty bulletproof. We've done our. Oh yeah, we had to cut. We cut almost 4 inches off of the California fender to get this the sway bar to go to full bump. We fabricated the bump stop mounts. Yes, and they are kicked out off of the frame, but we had to move the track bar mount as far outboard as possible to give us better front geometry with the, you know, this is an East Coast, West Coast thing. It's East Coast suspension and West Coast armor. With the East Coast front 3-link, it pulls with the short track bar mount that was provided by East Coast Gear. I do believe it came with the axle. To put that track bar more or less in the factory position with a 3-link, it pulls the front end about 3 inches sideways as the passenger side droops. It's redunculous. So we fabricated this track bar mount and made a track bar to get it clear over here as wide as we can get it. We're actually had 2 different radiuses on that mount, one that fit the tube and one that fit the reed knuckle. So the track bar mount is welded up onto the knuckle to get it as far as it goes. And I don't know if I can steer this by hand. Probably not. Hang on. And true to my normal MO, there is 5 pounds of shit in a shot glass in that one spot. Everything clears. Full bump, full droop, full articulated in both directions. it gets really, really tight at droop to passenger, but everything clears. We use all commercial off-the-shelf parts in our steering that actually are 1 ton rated, not all this made up 2.5 ton stuff. Those all come off a 1 ton Chevy truck. Drag link ends and the tie rod ends are off of a W380s Dodge with a Dana 60. Been using them for 30 years. I've never had one fail. There's no reason for all this 2.5 ton, or is it 5 ton, or whatever the current marketing hype is with stupid oversized tie rod ends that don't clear wheels, don't fit where they need to fit, blah 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 blah. So we've been cutting on the West Coast armor. When we got it, before we put the towers in, there was over a 1/2 inch gap here because the inner fender doesn't fit, but luckily we had to dissect the inner fenders to put our towers in, so we can slide that to where it's supposed to be. And once we get done with all our final trimming, we'll have a nice 1/2 to 3/4 inch gap around the coilover tower, so nothing binds when it flexes and articulates. So we're getting there. We've got most of the heavy fab work is done. Jason is supposed to be bringing me the rear bumper cross member assembly. We've taken our standard cross member and modified it a touch because of the West Coast gas tank. Typically when we do a body lifted Jeep, we cut all the mounts off, raise all the mounts, so the body lift is mechanical versus a spacer. Keeps, for those of you that live in places that have inspections and things of that nature, we bend the rules a little bit and keep you out of the body lift spacer game by raising all the mounts, which also includes that factory rear cross member. We cut that off and raised the upper flange. But the problem with that, our design also brings the gas tank flange with it that inch, and this particular gas tank can only be mounted in factory position unless you're going to cut the floor out, because of that corner right there, my finger right there, that corner, when it's bolted in the factory position, is all but touching the floor, so you cannot raise the gas tank to gain extra departure angle. So we had to basically meld our standard rear cross member with our body lift rear cross member to keep the gas tank flange in the factory position, but yet raise the body mounts an inch, which eliminates the big gap you see under the back of the body. So it just looks so much cleaner. Well, while we were doing that, I'll take you back and show you my TJ. When we did Tanner's back half kit, I tasked Tanner and Jason to come up with something a little more than just a cross member. So this is what we had on the original back half kit. So we just have this cross member deal. Well, that kind of leaves the back of the body vulnerable, so then I modified a slider tube and spacer and kind of put a little rub rail thing across the back. Works, it's functional. But I just wanted a different look, so we took our rear cross member, incorporated a nice set of backup lights, and kind of gave it a little shape. And as you can see, it sticks out past the body just a whisker, just enough that if you're in a bad spot and got to throw it in reverse, you should hit the frame versus crushing taillights. So we're going to incorporate that design feature into what's going on in the back of Ryan's Jeep. So that should be here hopefully anytime now. We can get that put on this afternoon and then finish fitting armor and plumbing supplies will be here tomorrow, so we can fabricate all new fuel lines, because the next stage of this build is an LS. So we're going to pre-install all of the fuel line we need for that swap and make it work with 4-liter in the interim. So that will already be pre-plumbed and done. We won't have to go back. For those of you that don't know me very well, I love doing things, but I hate doing them twice. So while we got it all tore apart, now's the time to put the new fuel lines in. Also, with stretching an LJ or a TJ or a YJ or anything, the factory steel brake line was designed to end here and connect to your axle there. Well, now the axle's not there anymore, so you move all that back. Well, then the two don't meet, so we're going to replumb the entire chassis with new steel line.
Are we powder coating those?
Yes, so that we can get things cut and flared and mounted and never have to go back and look at that. Part of the brake upgrade is that 1-ton Dodge master cylinder.
Oh, look what else.
And speaking of the rear cross, remember, here it comes. So we just, and with the way these fenders are done, none of the factory brake lines work very well anyway, so we're just replumbing the whole chassis and giving it all brand new brakes lines. It's getting new brakes because they're part of the axle. So what's up, Sean? So here's Jason's cross member assembly / bumper. He moves one of Nick's clamps. We'll slide her up there and see what we get. Yeah, I should just, as long as he measured everything, and it'll slip right on just like that. Now that's just got to be aligned. There's, for those of you that are familiar, there's a threaded insert up under here that we already have the hole in, so you put the bolt back in there, bolt the bumper on, kind of make sure it's centered left to right on the Jeep, and drop your hood and weld her home. So,
Bada boom, bada bing.
right. So, but it gives the back of the Jeep a much nicer look. Yeah, it's all got to be, we're just cut, bent, and tacked together at this point, but now that we know that it's going to fit, I'll pull it off and throw it on the bench after lunch, and we'll get it all pre-welded. You know, the D-ring tabs are just tacked, the end caps are just tacked, the mounts are just tacked. But once all of that's done, then we do what Jason just did, slip it on and weld it to the Jeep. It is a permanent piece. It's not really designed to be taken on and off. You can take anything off if you're good with a torch or a plasma cutter, but this one's not designed to be removable. Which part of that is sooner or later you are going to get stuck and somebody's going to need to hook a snatch strap to it and give it a good tug. You really don't want to be relying on little cheesy hardware, because the guy, the tugger, does not need to end up with his your bumper in his lap or windshield frame or forehead, or wherever it ends up. So it will be permanently installed.
Becomes part of the
So, right. So I guess that's what we've been up to. We've been crashing on this thing for a couple of weeks. We got sidetracked because Mary showed you all of our outdoor projects.
No, I didn't.
But we just put down 62 yards of concrete. So our bays were closed for a while. So we kind of got sidetracked with that project. It's bright out here, so now we have a nice full concrete. Well, that already was existing, but the seam is there. So from there, that way is all new, all the way out to the street, and then added 5 feet of apron for a 20-foot apron versus the 15-foot we had failing, and all new ballards that are now, look at that, they're all straight in a line. What a concept. They were all over the place from the previous owner. So that's kind of what we've been up to around here. Try to get all that concrete working before we got snow, and we managed to pull that off. So Mother Nature cooperated. And then, the guys it was very entertaining trying to keep cars in and out when you have a little over 10-inch approach, because we dug right out to the doors. So we were moving blocks and 2x4s and whatnots and this, that, and the others to try and keep cars coming in and out of the building, so we could keep working. So thankfully that project is behind us, and now we're back on to doing other cool stuff, like putting this holy shit heavy front bumper on this Ford F450. So guys got that on yesterday, so today we're wiring lights and sensors, and these new trucks are pretty complicated. It's a good looking bumper though, but it is big. And this poor little broken YJ over here came in. My Jeep's making a funny noise. Well, when the motor mount is completely ripped off and the only thing holding the passenger side of the motor up is the distributor, they tend to make funny noises. So we got our buddies down at Moore sending us a set of their 5-bolt block mounts so that we can try and fix the broken ones and tie into a couple that are not broke and see if we can save this. The only alternative is a new engine, and the customer kind of peed himself when we told him what was wrong with it and what the fix is. So we're going to see if we can save it with the Moore mounts. We've used them in the past on a TJ. I don't know if any of you guys remember Stephen Hardart's TJ that kind of got back-halfed and chopped up because Jason got carried away on a weekend and kind of half truggied. That one had a AX15. I was going to say NV3550, but it wasn't that old or new. So it had an AX15 with a 5-to-1 Atlas in it, and when you gear a TJ that deep and put 48 stickies on it and 513s, if I remember, axle gearing, and you throw it at Captain Crunch in South Dakota, that much torque multiplication with that much traction equals breaking the whole side of the block and ripping, not like that one failed. It stayed bolted together. It just ripped the whole side of the block out. Pretty much your day's over at that point. So, for those of you running deep geared manual TJs or YJs, look the guys up at Mountain Off-Road Equipment. We call them more. They make a really bitchin'. It picks up 2 more castings on the side of the engine block and distributes the load that much further. It's a worthy upgrade if you're running a deep geared. I had them on my old Trail Boss TJ because that was built the same, AX15 with a 5-to-1 Atlas. 513s. That one only had sticky 37s on it, but nonetheless. So Jason's got that on, so we'll weld that up after lunch and finish. That's the last piece of chassis fabrication. Once we get the armor fitted and cycle it one more time, make sure everything's where I want it, and we blow it all apart, send things to powder coat and paint and finish welding and then hopefully in the next week or so get it fully assembled and on the road. Oh, another thing, we did have some mid-America parts going into this Jeep. I think they're in this box. Not that box. Where'd they go? Oh, here they are. Our good friend and counterpart over in Salt Lake sent us these. If I can get them out. No, I can't get them out. Yeah, whatever. They're in there. Since we stretched the front end of this, the East Coast supplied suspension is only a rear stretch. Well, we stretch both ends. So none of the links were long enough. So Jolene made us a set of lowers, billet aluminum lowers, and then we modified the factory upper, the East Coast upper. It's hard to see because it is really packed in here. Oh, no, I turned the camera the wrong way. There it is. We made that upper link end and put all the length in that end and changed, I don't know if you can see it from, yeah, there it is. Just poking out right there. Changed the angles in it a little bit to move the control arm inboard because it was crashing into the frame on articulation, and well, you can see it's still pretty tight down in there. Get past all this other stuff. There it is. You know, on which way does it go? On driver's side stuff, it's almost touching the frame. Not quite. It does clear. So, but we fixed that as well. So I think my wife is pacing, and she's hungry. She's actually probably hangry by now.
I'm withering away.
Yeah, she's just melting away, and I guess we'll wrap this up and stay tuned. I don't know what we're doing next week for TNT Tuesday. Probably something I'm manufacturing, but hopefully 2 Tuesdays from now, this will be moving
2
under.
Tuesdays from now, it'll be almost our time for leave for our trip.
Right. So that's our goal, is to get this buttoned up and a couple of laps around the neighborhood and get back to the customer
For his Christmas
before Christmas. So
because we got more coming.
yeah, we got a couple of. We got one coming. Like the 14th, I think Tanner said. And then I understand. I see Robert's on here. I take it we're getting Robert's Jeep. is kind of what I've been hearing. So putting some length and some legs in a 2-door JK with a true dual triangulated rear suspension, not a single triangulated. That, well, whatever. So with all of that, stay tuned. We're always building cool stuff. If you need anything, call Tanner or Mary. They'll get you hooked up with the latest and greatest or the oldest standby parts. We got lots of them, been around a long time, still working well. So, but we do have some new stuff coming. JL wise, JL Unlimited. That's all I'm going to tell you on that, but there's some pretty cool stuff on the drawing boards for them. Hopefully this spring, before the big wheeling season starts again, that's up and running. Yeah, my TJ's going to be running hopefully this spring. And Rex, you know, if you're watching over there in Dubai, Pat, Rex is still sitting back here. We had to move him in the back again for the concrete work, but as soon as this thing moves, it's coming back up front and all hands on deck. I need it done, as does Pat. And so lots of Jeeps to build in the next couple of months. So stay tuned. We'll keep showing you cool stuff. Well, who else would work on yours, Robert? So we'll finish this up and see you next week.